The first time my mother-in-law blamed me for something that wasn't my fault, it was a wine glass. Not a broken one, not even chipped, just missing, according to Marlene Caldwell, who stood in her immaculate kitchen and looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. "We only use those on special occasions," she said, her voice sweet in the way sugar can hide poison. I'm sure it didn't mean anything, but it's unsettling. You understand. I had been in their house for 20 minutes. My husband, Noah, was behind her near the pantry, pretending to scroll through his phone. His jaw tightened slightly, the tiniest tell that he heard what she was doing, but he didn't look up. He didn't say, "Mom, stop." He didn't say, "Lena would never." He just stayed quiet, as if silence was neutral. I remember thinking, maybe he's shocked. Maybe he doesn't know what to do. I didn't know yet that his silence was a habit, a skill, a strategy. By the end of that first year of marriage, if you asked the Caldwells what the problem was in their family, the answer would have had my name in it. Lena is too sensitive. Lena takes things the wrong way. Lena is controlling. Lena changed Noah. Lena doesn't fit. When people say those things with a smile, when they frame cruelty as concern, you start to question your own reality. You start rehearsing your words before you speak, trimming your emotions down until they're small enough to be reasonable. You start apologizing for things you didn't do because you're tired of being the reason the room goes cold. And you start learning something dangerous. It's easier to be blamed than to be believed. Noah and I met when I was 27 and convinced my life was finally settling into shape. I had a job I liked, friends I trusted, a tiny apartment that was mine down to the chipped mug I refused to throw away because it made me laugh. Noah walked into that life like he'd been written into it. Tall, charming, thoughtful in a way that didn't feel performative. He made the barista's day. He tipped generously. He listened like what you said mattered. I fell in love with the way he looked at me when I talked, like he was proud of me for existing. The first time I met his parents was at a restaurant so expensive the menus didn't have prices. I wore a dress that made me feel elegant. Marlena complimented it, then asked where I got it with the kind of curiosity that sounded like a test. When I told her, she nodded slowly, like she'd filed away information about my budget. His father, Richard, shook my hand like he was sealing a contract. His sister Sloane kissed my cheek and told me she'd heard so much, then spent the rest of dinner asking questions about my family like she was looking for a crack. Noah sat between me and them, smiling, answering, smoothing. I told myself nerves made people weird. I told myself it would get better once they got to know me. It didn't. It got more sophisticated. Small things became patterns. Marlene would forget to tell me dinner plans changed, and then sigh dramatically when I didn't show up on time. Sloane would tell stories about Noah's exes in front of me, always with a little laugh, always framed as just memories. Richard would make offhand comments about how women these days didn't understand sacrifice, and Noah would laugh lightly like it wasn't aimed at me. Every time I tried to address it on the drive home, Noah would grip the steering wheel and say, "Babe, you're reading too much into it." Or, "My mom doesn't mean it like that." Or the one that always made my throat close, "Can we not do this? I just want peace." Peace, to Noah, meant no conflict, no confrontation, no discomfort. It didn't mean fairness. It didn't mean truth. It meant keeping the temperature in the room stable, even if I was the one freezing. The first time we fought for real wasn't even about his family. It was about boundaries. We'd been married 6 months when Marlene began dropping by. She'd call Noah, never me, and announce she was in the neighborhood. She'd show up with a bag of groceries as proof she was being helpful. She'd rearrange my pantry while I stood there, holding a cereal box like I'd been caught doing something wrong in my own home. One Saturday, I came out of the bedroom to find her in my bathroom. Not using it, organizing it. She'd taken my makeup brushes out of their cup and lined them up on a towel. She'd thrown out a shampoo bottle because it was too chemical. She'd opened the cabinet under my sink and made a face like she'd discovered a crime scene. I couldn't breathe. My skin felt tight. "Marlene," I said, voice shaking, "please don't go through our things." She turned slowly, eyes wide with that practiced innocence. "Oh my goodness, I was just trying to help. Noah said you've been overwhelmed." Noah was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, silent. I stared at him. "You said I've been overwhelmed?" Noah's face flashed with discomfort. You've been tired lately." Marlene made a soothing noise. "Sweetheart, you don't have to be embarrassed. It's hard to be a wife. Some women struggle with the transition." There it was again. The implication that I was less capable than the women in their family. That needing privacy was a weakness. That my home was still theirs to manage. "I'm not embarrassed," I said. "I'm upset." Marlene's smile thinned. "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. But this is how families are. We show up." Noah still didn't speak. That night, after she left, I turned to him and said, "Why didn't you stop her?" Noah rubbed his face like I was asking him to solve a math problem he didn't have time for. "Because it wasn't a big deal." "It was a huge deal," I said. "She was in our bathroom. She threw away my shampoo." Noah shrugged. "My mom is like that. She's trying." "She's not trying," I said, and my voice broke. "She's taking over, and you're letting her." Noah's eyes went sharp for the first time. "So what do you want me to do? Pick a fight with my mom every time she breathes wrong?" I stared at him. "Yes, if she's hurting your wife." He exhaled hard. "You're making it worse." That sentence, simple, dismissive, landed like a brick. I didn't know it then, but it was the beginning of the role they would hand me. The instigator, the problem, the reason things were tense. After that, any boundary I tried to set became evidence that I was difficult. If I asked for a heads up before visits, Marlene told Noah I was isolating him from family. If I didn't laugh at Richard's jokes, he called me uptight. If I declined Sloane's invitation to a girls' weekend because I had work, Sloane sighed and said I was not a team player. Noah absorbed these complaints like weather. He didn't argue with them. He didn't defend me. He just turned to me afterward with tired eyes and said, "Can you just try a little harder? Try harder to be smaller. Try harder to be grateful. Try harder to take hits without flinching." The day I realized it was intentional was the day Marlene cried. It was Noah's birthday. I planned a small dinner at our apartment. Just us, my best friend Tessa, and her boyfriend. I made Noah's favorite meal. I got the cake from that bakery he loved. I put candles in it like I was offering him something sweet and simple in a life that was starting to feel crowded. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. "Marlene, we're on our way." My stomach dropped. I called Noah. "Your mom says they're coming." Noah's voice was casual. "Yeah, I told them." "You told them?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Noah, I didn't invite them. He sighed like I'd inconvenienced him. It's my birthday. They wanted to stop by. We have people coming, I said. We have a plan. They're my family, he said, as if that ended the discussion. They arrived at 7, with balloons and wine, and Richard carrying a gift bag, like he was presenting evidence of his generosity. Sloane swept in, wearing perfume that filled my living room, kissed Noah on the cheek, then looked around and said, "Oh, cute. Intimate." My best friend Tessa walked in minutes later and immediately felt the shift. She squeezed my hand in the kitchen and whispered, "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. Fine. Dinner was tense. Richard took over conversation like he owned the table. Marlene asked Tessa questions that sounded friendly, but were actually fishing. Sloane made a comment about how Noah always loved a cozy night in, then glanced at me like she was warning me not to take credit. Halfway through the meal, Marlene said brightly, "So Lena, did you ever get that promotion you wanted?" I blinked. I'm not up for promotion this cycle. Marlene's eyes widened. Oh, I thought Noah said you were being considered. That's why you've been so stressed. My fork paused. Noah stared at his plate. I looked at him, and something inside me went cold and clear. He had been telling them things. Not just facts, but narratives. He had been feeding them the version of me that made their behavior justified. If I was stressed, they could help. If I was struggling, they could criticize. If I was unstable, Noah could claim his silence was patience. I swallowed hard and kept eating, because my body knew something my pride didn't want to accept yet. If I fought at that table, I would lose. And I did. Not by shouting, but by being placed in a story they had already decided was true. After dinner, as guests gathered coats, Marlene pulled me aside in the hallway and said softly, "You should be careful, sweetheart. Men don't like being controlled. Noah is very loyal, but even loyal men have limits." I stared at her. I'm not controlling him. Marlene's smile was gentle. I didn't say you were. I said you should be careful. When everyone left, Noah went quiet. He cleaned up dishes aggressively, avoiding my eyes. Finally, he said, "You embarrassed my mom." I turned toward him, stunned. I embarrassed her? She felt unwelcome, he said, voice tight. She cried in the car. I let out a short, incredulous laugh, because I didn't greet her like she was the guest of honor at the party she crashed. Noah's face hardened. This is why they think you don't like them. I don't like the way they treat me, I said. And you're letting them. Noah slammed a plate into the sink. Because you make it a war. It doesn't have to be like this. I stared at him, heart pounding. Then make it not like this. Noah's shoulders rose and fell. He looked tired. I can't change my family. No, I said, voice shaking, but you can change what you allow. Noah didn't answer. That night, he slept on the couch. In the morning, he acted like nothing happened. He kissed my forehead, said he loved me, and left for work. Like a husband who loved me couldn't possibly be a husband who abandoned me. 2 weeks later, the blame got louder. Marlene told Noah I was turning him against his mother. Richard called Noah and warned him not to let a woman ruin his backbone. Sloane texted Noah pictures of old family vacations with captions like, "Miss when we were all happy." Noah stopped telling me about plans. He just informed me. We're going to my parents' on Sunday. Sloane is coming over. Mom wants to do lunch. Every time I protested, he sighed and said, "Do you want another fight?" It was always framed as my choice, my fault, my refusal to keep the peace. That's when I started doing something that, from the outside, probably looked like surrender. I stopped arguing. Not because I gave up, but because I started watching. When Marlene made passive comments, I smiled politely. When Richard insulted me, I let it slide. When Sloane baited me, I didn't bite. I became, in their eyes, easier. In my own eyes, I became a recorder. I started writing things down, not dramatic diary entries, just factual notes with dates. I saved texts. I stopped deleting emails. I took screenshots when Sloane sent something cruel and then unsent it later. I kept a folder on my phone called Receipts, because I learned the hard way that memory is flimsy when a room full of people insist your reality is wrong. Noah noticed my quiet and mistook it for peace. "See," he said one night, relieved. "This is better. You're not reacting." I looked at him, feeling something break and reform inside me. "I'm reacting," I said softly. "Just differently." Noah didn't ask what I meant, because he didn't want to know. The twist, the thing that made it all click, came on a random Thursday, the kind of day where nothing big is supposed to happen. Noah left his laptop open on the kitchen counter when he ran out to take a call. I wasn't snooping. I was wiping crumbs like I always did. But a message notification popped up on the screen, and I saw Marlene's name. "I don't know how much longer you can tolerate her moods. If you need to remind her who she married, we'll support you." My hand froze. Another message followed from Sloane. "Just keep letting her look crazy. It's working. Mom's friends already think she's unstable." I stared at the screen, stomach turning. Noah didn't just stay quiet. He was participating. He was letting them manipulate me by making me the villain, and he was allowing it because it made his life easier. Because if I was the problem, he didn't have to deal with theirs. Noah came back into the kitchen, phone in hand, and saw my face. "What?" he asked. I stepped back from the counter like the air around the laptop was poisonous. "Nothing." Noah narrowed his eyes. "Did you read my messages?" "No," I lied smoothly, because I suddenly understood the game. If I confronted him then, he'd deny. He'd say it was taken out of context. He'd say his mom was worried. He'd say Sloane was dramatic. He'd say I was overreacting. And even if he admitted it, he'd try to fix it the way he fixed everything, by asking me to swallow it. So I decided I wasn't going to fight on their stage. I was going to build my own. That night, Noah reached for me in bed, wanting closeness like intimacy could plaster over betrayal. I let him hold me and stared into the dark, listening to his breathing settle into sleep. In my mind, I began counting what I needed. Proof, timing, witnesses. A clean exit if I had to take it. A way to tell the truth that couldn't be twisted into Lena is having another episode. Over the next month, I became careful. I went to therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I needed someone outside the Caldwell system to keep me anchored. My therapist, Dr. Reyes, listened to my story and said something that made me cry so hard I couldn't breathe. "You've been trained to doubt yourself," she said gently. "That's the point." I started telling Tessa more. I started rebuilding my circle. I picked up extra freelance work to pad my savings. I opened a separate account Noah didn't know about. not because I wanted to punish him, but because I finally understood that love without safety is a trap. And I kept letting them blame me. Marlene hosted a family dinner and loudly commented about people who enter families and try to change them. I smiled and asked if she wanted help clearing plates. Richard called me emotional when I disagreed with him about something trivial. I nodded and said, "Maybe you're right." Sloane told Noah in front of me that I was not fun anymore. I laughed lightly and said, "I've been busy." They loved it. They thought I'd finally been put in my place. Noah loved it too, because the house was quiet again. But my quiet wasn't surrender. It was preparation. The event that set my timing was supposed to be a celebration. Richard Caldwell was retiring, at least officially, from the construction firm he'd run for 30 years, and the family planned a big retirement party at their country club. Marlene sent an invitation like a command. Sloane coordinated everything down to the napkin color. Noah was stressed for weeks, the way he always was when his family needed him to perform. "It has to be perfect," he said, pacing our living room. "Dad's earned this." I watched him, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Perfect. That's what they wanted. A perfect image. A perfect story. I understood then that the only thing the Caldwells feared more than conflict was public truth. If they couldn't control the room, they couldn't control me. So I waited. I waited through weeks of planning and whispered blame, through Noah's "just ignore them" and Marlene's "we all want what's best," through Sloane's subtle digs and Richard's condescension. I waited until the night they gathered everyone who mattered to them in one place, under chandeliers and soft music, with their reputations dressed up in formal wear. I waited until the truth was ready. The country club ballroom looked like the inside of a wedding magazine. White linens, pale flowers, candlelight that made everyone's skin look smoother than reality. A string quartet played in the corner. Servers moved like shadows, refilling glasses before they were empty. The Caldwells were in their element. Marlene stood near the entrance, greeting people with both hands on their forearms, as if affection was a brand she could apply. Richard held court near the bar, laughing loudly at stories that made him sound generous and self-made. Sloane floated between groups like she was collecting admiration. Noah looked handsome in his suit, hair neatly styled, smile slightly strained. He kept scanning the room the way he always did in his parents' spaces, watching for emotional landmines, prepared to defuse them by sacrificing whoever was closest. Usually that was me. I wore a deep blue dress that made me feel like myself again. Not because it was flashy, but because it fit. Because I had chosen it without anyone's opinion attached. I had my hair down. I had lipstick on. I looked, for the first time in a long time, like a woman who belonged in her own body. Noah leaned in as we walked toward the main table. "Just be nice tonight," he murmured. I glanced at him. "I'm always nice." His jaw tightened. "You know what I mean." I did. He meant, don't embarrass us. Don't react. Don't make them uncomfortable. I smiled softly. "Don't worry." Noah exhaled, relieved, and didn't notice the weight of my purse. Didn't ask why I held it close. Didn't realize I'd put more than a phone and lipstick inside. The first hour was exactly what you'd expect. Speeches, toasts, Richard's colleagues praising his integrity and leadership, Marlene dabbing at her eyes as if pride could be measured in tears, Sloane beaming like she'd personally built the company. Noah stayed near his family, laughing at the right moments. When someone asked me how I was, Marlene would answer for me. "She's doing well," she'd say brightly. "We've had some growing pains, but she's learning." Learning. As if marriage was an internship and I was the underqualified hire. I smiled and let her talk. I felt eyes on me throughout the night. People who had heard things. People who were curious. I caught a woman's sympathetic look from across the room and realized she'd probably heard the version of me that painted me as difficult. I let her believe it a little longer. Because timing matters. At 9 o'clock, the MC announced the highlight of the night, a short video montage of Richard's life and career. The lights dimmed and conversations quieted into a soft hum. The screen at the front of the room lit up with photos. Richard in a hard hat, Richard cutting ribbons, Richard shaking hands with local politicians, Richard at charity events with Marlene beside him, smiling. Then the MC said, "And now, a few words from Noah, Richard's son." Noah stiffened. He hadn't told me he was giving a speech. Of course he hadn't. Noah always kept me slightly off balance. It made it easier to manage me. He walked to the microphone, smiling tightly. "Thanks, everyone. Tonight is really special." His voice was good, warm, practiced, the voice of a man who'd learned to perform safety. He spoke about Richard's sacrifices, about Marlene's support, about Sloane's dedication, about family values. He told a story about Richard teaching him how to throw a baseball and then linked it to leadership, because everything in that family became a lesson. I watched him and felt something like grief and affection tangled together. Noah wasn't evil. He was weak in a way that was harmful. He was a man raised in a system where love was conditional and peace was bought with silence. He didn't know how to be brave when bravery risked rejection. But his weakness had a cost, and I had paid it. Noah ended his speech with a smile. "Dad, you've always been an example to me. I hope I can live up to your legacy." The room applauded. Richard hugged him, proud. Marlene looked radiant. Noah stepped down from the stage and returned to our table. He leaned in, voice low. "See? It's going fine." I met his eyes. It is. At 9:30, Marlene stood and clinked her glass gently. "Before we wrap up," she said, smiling, "I just want to thank everyone for being here. Family is everything. We've had a challenging year, but it's made us stronger." Her gaze flicked to me, subtle but sharp. "And I want to publicly thank Noah," she continued, "for being patient and loving through all of it. It's not easy when someone brings tension into a family, but Noah has remained steady." The room went quiet in that delicate way it does when people sense drama but don't know whether they're supposed to enjoy it. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. This was the moment they thought they were winning. Noah's face tightened. He didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, letting his mother frame him as a hero and me as the villain in front of everyone who mattered to them. I could have snapped then. I could have stood up and shouted. I could have demanded respect. But arguing in the heat of humiliation is exactly what people like Marlene rely on. If I reacted emotionally, I'd prove her narrative. Lena is unstable. Lena is dramatic. Lena ruins events. So I did what I'd practiced. I smiled. I stood slowly, careful, and took my napkin from my lap like I had all the time in the world. I walked toward the microphone without rushing, without anger, without visible shaking. Marlene blinked. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain. I reached the stage and said gently, "Marlene, thank you. That's very thoughtful." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the room. Noah's eyes met mine, alarm flashing. He mouthed, "Lena." I picked up the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Richard's colleagues, Marlene's friends, the people who had been fed the story of me. Then I said calmly, "Since we're talking about family and strength, I want to share something too." Marlene's smile stiffened. Sloane's eyes narrowed like she could smell danger. Noah took a step forward, but Richard's hand stopped him, firm. Richard wanted to see what I'd do. He wanted to measure the threat. I continued, voice steady. "This year has been challenging. That part is true. But I think it's important to be honest about why." A hush fell. I opened my purse and pulled out a neatly folded stack of papers. Not dramatic, not messy, organized, labeled. I saw Sloane's face go pale. I heard Marlene whisper, "No." Noah's breath caught. "Lena, please." I looked at him and my voice didn't change. "You've asked me for peace so many times, Noah. You've told me not to react. You've told me to try harder. So I did." I turned back to the room. For months, I've been blamed for every uncomfortable moment. Every boundary I tried to set was called tension. Every time I asked for respect, it became a story about me being difficult. Marlene's eyes flashed. "This is not appropriate." I held up a hand, not aggressive, just clear. "I'm almost done." That alone, the simple act of interrupting her, felt like shifting gravity. I looked at the crowd again. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't throw scenes. I let people think what they wanted. Marlene's voice sharpened. "Because you are sensitive, Lena." I smiled slightly, almost sad. Because I was gathering facts. Then I held up the first page. "This is a text message from Sloane to Noah, dated March 14th. Sloane stood abruptly. "You have no right." I read it anyway, slowly, clearly, without dramatics. "Just keep letting her look crazy. It's working. Mom's friends already think she's unstable." A collective inhale moved through the room. Sloane's face flushed. "That's taken out of context." I nodded once. "Here's the context." I lifted another page. "This is from Marlene to Noah." I read, "I don't know how much longer you can tolerate her moods. If you need to remind her who she married, we'll support you." Marlene's hand flew to her chest. Oh my God. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Richard's face had changed. Less amused now, more calculating. Noah looked like he might be sick. I kept my voice even. "I'm not sharing this to humiliate anyone. I'm sharing it because my character has been quietly assassinated in this room for months, and I'm done being the convenient villain." Marlene's eyes glittered with anger. "You're twisting things." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her heat. I just stayed steady. "There's more," I said, and I saw panic flicker across Noah's face. "But I want to be clear about the most important part." I looked at Noah. "You knew," I said softly. "You let it happen." Noah's mouth opened. No sound came out. I turned back to the room because this part mattered. I thought for a long time that Noah was stuck in the middle, that he didn't know how to handle his family, that his silence meant he was overwhelmed. My voice tightened slightly, not with rage, but with something heavier. His silence was agreement, I said. Not spoken, but practiced. And every time his family blamed me, he let them, because it kept the spotlight off of the real issue. Richard's eyes narrowed. And what's that? I met his gaze. Control. The word landed like a bell. Marlene laughed sharply, brittle. This is insane. I nodded, still calm. It sounds insane because it's been hidden behind manners, but I have a record of it. Dates, messages, patterns. I lifted the final sheet. And this, I said, is from Noah to me after one of your dinners when I asked him to set a boundary. Noah whispered, Lena, don't. I read anyway. Stop making it a war. You're making it worse. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft hum of the projector. I lowered the paper and looked out at faces that were no longer sympathetic to Marlene. Some were stunned. Some were embarrassed. Some were angry, because people hate being forced to see what they've participated in. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I'm not here to debate, I said. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to correct the record. Marlene stepped toward the stage, voice trembling with fury. How dare you? After everything we've done for you. I held up my hand again. That line, I said gently, is part of why this has been possible. I took a breath, steadying the emotion that tried to rise. I loved Noah, I continued. I still care about him. I wanted this family to work. That's why I kept quiet. I kept thinking if I tried harder, if I stayed calmer, if I didn't react, you'd stop. I looked at Marlene, then Sloane, then Richard. But you didn't stop, I said, because the blame wasn't about me. It was a tool. Noah finally stumbled forward, voice raw. Lena, please, not here. I turned to him fully. Where, Noah? I asked softly. At home, where you tell me I'm overreacting? In the car, where you ask me for peace? In private, where your family can deny everything and call me dramatic? Noah's eyes filled. I can fix it. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. You had 1,000 chances. Marlene snapped. Noah, tell her to stop. Noah looked at his mother, then at me, and I saw the conflict tearing him open. And then, finally, he did something different. He didn't tell me to stop. He looked at the room and said hoarsely, It's true. A stunned silence. Marlene blinked rapidly. Noah. Noah's voice broke. I let you blame her. I let you do it because I didn't want to deal with you, and I didn't want to deal with him, he added, glancing at Richard. Richard's face went hard. Watch yourself. Noah flinched, the old reflex, but then he swallowed and kept going. I told Lena to be quiet, he said. I told her to keep the peace. I made her feel crazy, and I knew you were encouraging it. Marlene's face crumpled into outrage and heartbreak at once. We were protecting you. You were controlling me, Noah said, voice shaking. And you used my wife as the punching bag. Sloane's voice went sharp. Are you seriously doing this right now? Do you know how humiliating? Noah cut her off, and that alone felt like an earthquake. Stop. the word echoed. I stood still, microphone in hand, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. I hadn't come here hoping Noah would suddenly transform. I'd come here prepared to stand alone. But hearing him say it out loud was still something. I stepped back from the microphone and set my papers down neatly on the podium. "I'm leaving," I said. Not to threaten, not to punish, just to state a fact. I've already made arrangements. Marlene's head snapped toward me. Arrangements? What arrangements? I looked at her, calm. The kind you make when you realize you've been blamed as a strategy. Noah turned to me, eyes desperate. "Lena, please." I shook my head gently. "Not tonight, Noah." He looked broken. I finally said it. I nodded. "I heard you." Then I added, soft but clear, "Saying it once doesn't erase living it for months." I walked down from the stage, heels quiet on the carpet. People moved out of my path, like they weren't sure whether to stop me or apologize. Tessa was near the back of the room. When our eyes met, she nodded, pride and heartbreak in her expression. I walked past Noah's family, past Marlene's trembling rage, past Sloane's stunned fury, past Richard's cold calculation, and I didn't look back. Outside, the air was cool and clean. My lungs filled like they'd been starving. In the parking lot, my car sat under a streetlight. I got in, hands steady, and sat for a moment with my forehead resting against the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. "Please don't go." I stared at the message, then set my phone face down. I drove to Tessa's apartment because we'd planned it weeks ago, quietly, carefully. I had a suitcase in my trunk. I had my documents in a folder. I had a separate bank account with enough for first month's rent on a small place I'd already found. I had, for the first time in a long time, something that felt like safety. Noah called the next day. Then again. His messages were different now, less, "You're making it worse," more,